The environment is called turbulent, or turmoil, or chaos, or VUCA, or volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and so on. In the face of all those things, where some institutions are failing, joblessness is increasing, inflation is increasing, it might seem that we are in a hostile environment and that the very survival is something of a challenge. And here's an example of the Prophet, peace be on him, in his time that resonates today.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Muslim Matters. This week we are discussing Milad un-Nabi. My guest today is Dr. Fahim Muhammad. Welcome, Dr. Fahim.
Assalamu alaikum.
We'll start off. What is the meaning of Milad un-Nabi? Why do Muslims worldwide celebrate this occasion?
Milad un-Nabi is celebration of the birth of the Prophet, peace be on him, and it's the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, according to Sunni Muslims, and that's what it is. Why do Muslims celebrate the occasion? Well, it's a time where we reflect on the fact that the Prophet, peace be on him, was sent to us as a mercy, as told in the Quran, and he was sent as Uswatun Hasana, the beautiful example or model. So it's a time in the Islamic calendar where we use the occasion to reflect on the fact that the Prophet, peace be on him, was sent as a gift to humankind and to us as Muslims as an example to follow, along with the teachings and the principles that would have come. Yeah.
Good. Okay. How does the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, mark a turning point in human history?
Well, up to that point, what you had were different prophets and messengers who came to different civilizations, their respective communities, with different aspects of the message. Some were sent as examples of patience, for instance, or forbearance, and some were sent as examples of reason and logic, or some were sent as examples of challenge to authority or as authority themselves. Right? So you had different messengers who came and different prophets who came with different parts of the message, but the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, was the point where, as Muslims, we believe and we are told that the message was now sent in its complete form. And the Prophet, peace be on him, was the one to bring that message to humankind. And the message was contained within the Quran and personified in the example of the Prophet, peace be on him, himself to everyone across the board. Here was one universal example that is applicable for persons anywhere in the world, so throughout space and anywhere in time moving forward. So, one unified example over space and time for anyone to look at and consider and exemplify and personify. And that is really the turning point with the advent of the Prophet, peace be on him. And that is what makes the difference in Islam, in a large extent, in Islamic beliefs as opposed to other denominations.
So he was a messenger to all of mankind. Yeah.
All of mankind moving forward and all of mankind across different cultures and all of mankind over time.
If we can take one core lesson from the life of Prophet Muhammad, upon whom peace this Milad, what would it be?
I mean, there are so many examples, so many messages, so many lessons that resonate. But if I look at life today, what I would say is before he was all of these things that we recognize him to be: a leader, a judge, a husband, a reformer, a social activist, or whatever. First and foremost, so his faith wasn't shaken by it. And I think that's a lesson that resonates today in the environment is called turbulent, or turmoil, or chaos, or VUCA, or volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and so on. In the face of all those things, where some institutions are failing, joblessness is increasing, inflation is increasing, it might seem that we are in a hostile environment, and that the very survival is something of a challenge. And here's an example of the Prophet, peace be on him, in his time, that resonates today. And you had so many examples in the stories of the different prophets, peace be upon them, from the Quran and otherwise, where they each had to submit to Allah's will in their own way. Hazrat Noah, for example, was commanded to build an ark up on a mountain. Who does that? Usually it is build an ark down by the sea, right? So he that didn't bode too well for him in terms of uptake. People thought he was crazy. Prophet Joseph, peace be on him, was thrown by his family in the well, out of jealousy, and then taken into slavery, and then falsely accused and abandoned in jail by the people he helped, and so on. All these, so many different examples, and yet across the board they never gave up their faith and their resolve and their focus on their mission. And I think the Prophet, peace be on him, is the ultimate example of that, and it's something that would speak to us, in volumes today. Even in times of success, even if you are experiencing triumph over your detractors, your competitors, or whatever, not even then, you have the example where the Prophet, peace be on him, stayed humble and made sajda and prostrated himself, and he recognized that he was just a slave. I think he said that in a hadith: I am just a slave, so call me the slave of Allah and his messenger, and so on. So these are good examples for us in times of turbulence and trials and challenges and so on. We recognize that we are slaves to Allah's will, and we submit to him and his will, and depend on him for guidance to take us through it. We've done really well so far. We've survived 100% of our worst days. And in times of triumph, to prostrate ourselves and stay humble, that, this is by his mercy, and yes, it could change. Yes, we could hold on to it, but it's really not about us, and we're not all that. So that's
we should keep our faith.
that. Yeah, correct. And we'll not just keep the faith, but submit to the Almighty and his will. Yeah.
How can we celebrate Milad un-Nabi in a way that truly honors the spirit and message of the Prophet, peace be upon him?
Well, I'll be the first to acknowledge some groups within Muslim society don't believe that it should be celebrated at all, and they have their justifications for that. I take a different view, and I am with the majority of the Muslim world by recognizing that it's something that we should celebrate, and it should be a time where we engage in deeper reflection on his example and his life, and applying elements of that to us, in addition to just thanking God for sending him, and having us be part of that community. So how do we celebrate? The Prophet, peace be on him, would, from his example and from what I've seen of his example, he was sent to perfect both the outward and the inward dimensions of our existence. So there was no separation of physical and spiritual, or give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give unto Rome what belongs to Rome and whatever not. No, everything was part of a package, and everything was part of living that Islamic ideal. And therefore I would build on or draw from that context. Outwardly, of course, is if we celebrate it, it's something we should uphold or pronounce. So simple thing like keeping ourselves in a certain standard, beautifying ourselves, whether it's ghusl, wearing your best clothes, smelling nice, proper grooming, and so on. These are signs of celebration that we could adhere to as guided by the Sunnah and by Islam. Decorate the surroundings. I am all for that. And be bold about it, because it's something that we are celebrating, and it's a time for us to make that statement. So lights, different countries throughout the world use lights, banners, decorations, and so on. None of it contravening Islam, of course, and Islamic, because you don't want to propagate shirk, but things like that, or calligraphy, or lighting, or displaying books and different aspects of Islamic culture. I do believe that these things have a role to play, and if we don't do it, then we are falling short of part of our responsibility in making that assertion. On the inward side, well, this is, I guess, both inward and outward. We could do things like give charity more in commemoration of the event, and as a way to please Allah and thank Him for the mercy that He sent us. And of course, having gatherings and singing qasida and reciting those compositions that help us to recognize and reinforce our appreciation of our Prophet, peace be on him. Those are things that people could do internally, and this really should not be limited to Milad un-Nabi, but it should be throughout the year. Maybe amplified at the time of Milad un-Nabi, but things like send Darood as much as you can, as often as you can, is a goldmine of benefit to every believer, and it's not something that's emphasized enough, I would observe. Or the other thing that I don't hear much of at all is engage in deep self-reflection, which, from the example of the Prophet, peace be on him, he would do often. What is your relationship with Allah? How grateful are you for the favors that He have given? How repentant are you for any mistakes you would have made? And he would do that multiple times, whole day, every day, in essence. And those are things that are established in his seerah and in hadith that I think we would do well to emulate, especially in today's world where everything is about the authentic self and so on. So, and as it gets worse into a virtual and augmented reality, I think that authenticity and that self-reflection becomes critical so that we continue to have our bearings, in a world where the boundaries between what is real and what is fantasy is becoming increasingly gray. So here's an example that we were given, one dimension of the Prophet, peace be on him, example, and I think we would do well to uphold that more.
Yeah, we should really take some time off and do some self-reflection. Okay. How can everyday Muslims practically implement this Sunnah, the tradition of the Prophet, in modern fast-paced life of today?
I honestly believe that the example of the Prophet, peace be on him, in his time is extremely similar to the life that we live today. People tend to read it or approach the subject as literature, yeah, stories of a time gone by that was very different from today. But the reality is that if you were to juxtapose that time on today's context, you had Byzantine Rome to the north, the northeast, the northwest, and you had Persia to the northeast. Both were the dominant civilizations of the time, and you had the Arabian Peninsula was like what's the word, a ghetto, a kind of isolated appendage to civilization. Good artwork, good meat perhaps, love the gyros, but not much else, overall. A good oral tradition, but of course you don't have much writing utensils and activities in the desert. And you can't write in the middle of a sandstorm or if you're moving often. So good oral traditions. A lot of gangs. Each tribe was their own thing, and they would war with each other and so on. And we call those gangs today. So in that time, what you had was very similar to today's ghetto with gangs and gang violence and warfare, right? And I'm saying that to make the point that, in fact, the culture of the time, Jahiliyyah, the indicators of culture were a lot worse than what we face today. Where people would bury their children alive, because it was a girl child and whatever not. We started to see that with the One China policy some years ago, and they reversed that very quickly. So it was a pretty bad situation to be born into, especially as an orphan, where the strength of your father was the strength of your family, and so on. So all that to say, look, here is an example for human beings facing limitations and with human limitations as well. And a lot of what he experienced resonates with us today in our context. So the essence of Sunnah therefore becomes not something of perfection, but something of consistency. And we told that in a hadith. The most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are done regularly, even if small. So that's one thing that I would contextualize my response with, right? How can we practically implement the Sunnah today? First of all, I think there's need to study the Sirah and the Hadith from a modern lens, which would be helpful because it will help inform reality today. But his actions, his sayings, his guidance, and so on, we might find more than just consoling or comforting, but instrumental for our success today. And that's something that I think we would do well to embrace more of. From that view, I think, depending on the challenges that we face and where we are, because there's so much variance, right? Some people are very poor and some people are very wealthy, and some people are urban and some people are rural and so on, is to extract the guidance that most directly applies to our reality, our lived reality, and internalize those and make that part of our response to those situations. So for some it might be a quarrelsome neighbor. For some it might be a hostile environment, crime and so on. But there's guidance for that. Or if you have a core family, a small family that you cherish, there's guidance for that. Or if you are an orphan, well, there's an example there. Or if you have heavy responsibilities and you can't share it with other people and you're not getting support and you set aside or ostracized, well, there's an example for that. So I think learning the Sunnah and extracting and applying the elements that help us as we move from level to level is something that is invaluable. And of course, model his behavior as well. So a simple thing like salat on time, frequent recitation of the Quran, frequent zikr or remembering Allah, making astaghfar often, reflection, self-reflection, as I spoke about earlier, and humility. These are the things that help reframe our psychology towards not just survival but success. Just by way of example, a simple thing like salat on time and time management, and what the implications are for what we do and how we think is a massive thing. Yeah, a huge psychological impact. The act of making sijda and the rush of oxygen-rich blood to the prefrontal cortex for decision making and executive functions, etc., is something that people would overlook. And yet, you might find that once you start doing those things as commanded, you find that your decisions are more effective. You find that you're making more conscious assessments or decisions or whatever, which we call barakat, right? So, there are a number of things, and these are some of the things I would impress upon people.
Yeah, we could all relate to something that he went through in our own way, so we can reflect and learn how to overcome.
And share it as well, you know.
Yeah.
Share the example to others.
What we talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how can a Muslim cultivate a deep emotional sense of gratitude for being part of the Prophet's Ummah today?
To start with, I would say that I don't think in any context the expectation would be euphoria, or you're just always constantly happy and and running around celebrating the fact, right? I do believe that it would be more demonstrable and more reasonable for someone to demonstrate that appreciation by holding on to and manifesting the example that he would have left, right? Or the teachings that he would have shared. So, I mean, the example of the Prophet, he was grateful to Allah all the time, regardless of the situations. He would stand in prayer in the night until his feet swole, yeah. And when they ask him why he did all that, he would say, "Should I not be a grateful servant?" So he was constantly grateful to Allah. If he would, who was celebrated as that model and that example and so on, was so grateful for what he was given, I think for us today, we have every reason to be as, if not more, grateful for the advantages that we have in terms of quality of life and whatever not, right? Knowing what he underwent, the life he lived, and what he had to overcome is an eye-opener. And it shows us the efforts that he would have had to undergo to establish a mission, a message, and an example, right? He had to undergo the trials in order for us to be able to appreciate what it is he went through. And I think learning more about his life is a good way for us to build that gratitude and that appreciation for what he underwent. I think as well, by extension, understanding the messages that came from him, the principles that he established, and what that meant for human civilization thereafter up to today, from algorithms, to principles of justice, to universal values in economics, to inheritance protocols, and so on. A duty of care to others in the society, rights of different groups in society, how different religions or players should relate, and so on. I think these are things that he did that human civilization today still bears the trademarks of as standards of progress. Yeah. So there's a knowledge-driven form or a knowledge-driven basis to build that gratitude and to express it. And then there's a spiritual side. Fundamentally, Darood, as much as you can, as often as you can. And through that, you build a spiritual connection with Him and with Allah based on love and respect and care. In the same way that He loves and cares for the Muslims. Yeah? We are taught that on the Day of Judgment, everybody will be saying Nafsi, Nafsi, and He'll be saying Ummati, Ummati, my Ummah. And wouldn't it be spectacular to be a part of that group that He as the leader would be most concerned about? Yeah? So yeah, lots of ways.
It is so important that we really should get close to Him and remember Him. Remember what He went through. Well, we have reached the end. Thank you, Dr. Fahim, for being with us today, sharing your time and your knowledge. We thank you all for watching Muslim Matters. Be sure to subscribe and get our latest episodes and share with those who need it. We hope you join us again for another episode of Muslim Matters, brought to you by the MAI Institute, so you can learn more about Islam, so to live the best life for this world and the next life.